This video was brought to you by CuriosityStream. Thanks to a milder than average October, reductions in gas usage, and an impressive storage strategy, which means that 94% of Europe's gas storage is now filled, it looks like Europe has more than enough gas to last through this winter, despite Putin's best efforts. Consequently, European natural gas prices have started to come down from their previous highs. And on Monday, spot market prices actually went negative, meaning that traders were literally paying Europeans to take their gas. So in this video, we're going to be taking a look at how Europe successfully weaned itself off Russian gas, significantly reducing Putin's geopolitical leverage, as well as explaining why prices went negative the other day and how Putin might retaliate by cutting Europe's undersea cables. As you might have noticed, Europe and Russia have been fighting a sort of energy war in parallel to the war in Ukraine. Pre-invasion, Russia was Europe's single largest gas source, accounting for between 40 and 50% of the EU's gas imports. Now, most of this came via pipelines, and over the last few months, Russia has been steadily reducing the flow of gas through these pipes, presumably in an attempt to pressure Europe to end its support for Ukraine. Today, Russian gas flows to Europe are down about 75%, and zero gas is flowing through Nord Stream or Yamal Europe, which run into Germany and Central Europe respectively. Now, the Russians have claimed that these disruptions to gas flow are actually caused by technical issues. For example, Gazprom shut off Yamal Europe in April after Poland and Bulgaria refused to pay in rubles. Russia blamed the reduction in flows via the Ukraine transit system on the war and claimed that Nord Stream disruptions were because sanctions had prevented them from importing a turbine from Canada. As you'd expect, though, no one really bought this, and European heads of state promptly accused Russia of weaponizing its energy exports. And Russian state media basically admitted as much. In a video shared by Russia's embassy in Spain, encouraging Europeans to move to Russia, ominously warned that winter is coming.
This is Russia. Beautiful women, cheap gas, fertile soil, cheap taxi and delivery, Christianity, no cancel culture, vodka, economy that can withstand thousands of sanctions. Time to move to Russia. Don't delay. Winter is coming.
While Gazprom themselves released a video apparently suggesting that Europe will freeze over winter without Russian gas. Anyway, unfortunately for Gazprom, things haven't quite panned out like that. As we explained in a previous video, in late July, the EU passed a new directive requiring every EU country's gas storage to be at least 80% by November 2021. And those countries without domestic gas storage were required to sign so-called solidarity agreements with neighboring states, which often involved buying gas but storing it in another country's reserves in order to guarantee them access to gas in the event of an emergency. And all of this was in spite of the fact that at the time, European gas prices were at unprecedented highs. When the directive was announced in late June, European gas prices, as measured by the Dutch TTF benchmark, were at about €100 per megawatt hour. For context, this is about 6 times what it was back in 2021, when gas prices stabilized at about €15 per megawatt hour. And in part driven by European government efforts to meet these storage needs, over the next couple of months, gas prices climbed even higher, reaching a peak of about €350 in late August. Nonetheless, despite these sky-high prices, it looks like the EU has surpassed its own target by quite some distance. According to the EU's own data from mid-October, every country has filled its gas reserves to at least 80%, apart from Latvia and Hungary, who are currently at about 55 and 79% respectively. While the 4 countries with the largest available storage capacity have filled their reserves to more than 90%. Germany is at 96, Italy at 94, France at 99, and the Netherlands at 93. All in all, Europe's gas storage is now 94% full, representing about 1,000 terawatt-hours worth of energy. That number is about 11% higher than the 10-year annual average, which is particularly impressive given that in January, stocks were 23% below average. And Europe was able to achieve this, in part by reducing consumption. For instance, the EU Council recently ratified a voluntary 10% gross power consumption reduction target, and a mandatory 5% peak hours reduction target between December 1st and March 31st, on top of a voluntary 15% gas reduction target for this winter and various consumption reduction campaigns introduced by national governments. Accordingly, Europe's total gas use was down 15% in September and is expected to fall yet further. Anyway, these impressive consumption levels, combined with lower gas consumption and the fact that October has been particularly mild this year, have brought down European gas prices from their previous highs. Today, it looks like European gas prices have stabilized at about €100 per megawatt hour. But on Monday, hour-ahead prices, i.e. the price for gas delivered in the next hour, briefly went negative. This is essentially because there were loads of ships carrying LNG waiting to unload in European ports. But because storage is full at the moment, and there's little demand for gas right now, no one really wanted it. Now, because holding LNG and just floating around in European ports costs money, some of these ships basically offered to pay traders to take their gas so that they would be able to leave and sail off to somewhere else, hence the negative prices. So if month-ahead gas prices are down 70% and hour-ahead gas prices are going negative, does this mean that Europe's energy crisis is already over? Has the EU won the energy war against Putin already? Well, no, not quite. Gas prices are still way above their pre-war norms, and while negative prices are a symptom of the success of Europe's gas storage program, they're also a symptom of a shortage of storage. As we mentioned earlier, Europe currently has about 1,000 terawatt-hours worth of gas stored up, and while that might sound like a lot, Europe is expected to consume 600 terawatt-hours in January alone, so more total storage capacity would be welcome in order to take on some of this excess gas. Nonetheless, it does look like a major disaster has been averted, and as things stand, Putin is clearly losing the energy war. However, unfortunately for, Europeans and anyone who wants to avoid World War III, Russia has apparently responded to this by escalating. In the last couple of weeks, there's been an unprecedented number of attacks on Europe's infrastructure. For instance, there was the attack on both Nord Stream pipelines early in October, while at the same time, Norway reported drones flying near its gas facilities. Then, just a few days later, there was an attack on German train infrastructure. Then, a couple of weeks later, both of the underseas cables leading into the Shetland Islands were damaged in the same week. And finally, on October 15th, 3 underseas fiber optic cables in southern France were apparently sabotaged. Now, individually, these events wouldn't be all that suspicious, but the sheer number of them, all within a week, strongly suggests that they're at least linked. And the most plausible explanation here seems to be that having lost the first round of the energy war, Russia is escalating by attacking European energy and technology infrastructure. Now, Europe has upped their defenses around underseas cables in response, but this is pretty worrying stuff. Not just because if Russia were to cut off, say, the underseas cables that carry Norwegian gas into mainland Europe, they could immediately cut 30% of Europe's gas supplies, but also because it could provoke a response from NATO. In January, for example, the head of the UK's armed forces warned that an attack on the UK's undersea infrastructure would be considered an act of war, and therefore presumably merit a military response. So, while the energy war is going well for Europe right now, if Russia continues to escalate, it could start an entirely new crisis. And if the prospect of that depresses you, then here's something that might cheer you up. Last year, Team TLDR congregated for the first annual political pumpkin carving competition.
Each team member had 15 minutes to carve a random politician's face into a pumpkin before the others had to guess who they'd carved.
Everyone was furious at last year's result, so we brought the game back from the dead for round 2.
This time though, we headed to Rory's farm in Essex to up the game.
This time it was also a lot more serious and a lot more competitive.
Who did we carve?
Who won the contest?
Find out in TLDR's second annual political pumpkin carving contest. Exclusively on Nebula.
If you want to watch that video, along with a ton of other exclusive content, then you should head over to Nebula. That's a streaming service that we made with a bunch of our creator friends, and where we post exclusive explainers and some fun videos too, like our team attempting the British citizenship or our blooper reel. On Wednesday, Peru's Prime Minister... Oh God. I'm just going to ask next door, I'll be back. Turns out there's a bunch of useless next door. Nebula viewers also get many of our videos before YouTube, as well as all of our content ad-free. Now, if you want to sign up, the best way to do that right now is with the Nebula Curiosity Stream deal. That way, if you sign up to Curiosity Stream, home to some of the best documentaries available online, you'll also get Nebula included absolutely free. That means 2 streaming services for less than $15 a year. Anyway, thanks for supporting the channel, and click the link in the description to check out Nebula and the pumpkin video.